This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at AmericanExpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
I'm gonna take out Diane Court.
Diane Court doesn't go out. She's a brain trapped in the body of a game show hostess.
So it's Lloyd, and let's go out.
Oh, thanks, but I'm busy.
Busy on Friday?
Yeah.
Are you busy on Saturday?
Well,
Monumentally busy?
not monumentally.
What about tonight, then?
I'll go.
Excellent. It's a date. It's a scale. Quick question. Do you know who I am?
Say Anything. Rated PG-13.
In 1989, Cameron Crowe made his directorial debut with this 80s flick that would go on to define a generation of romantics and misfits. The story centers on Lloyd Dobler, an awkward yet irresistibly charming high school grad who's unsure of his future but knows exactly what he wants. Diane Court, the smart, enigmatic valedictorian who seems to have everything figured out except when it comes to love. Lloyd isn't the typical leading man. He's not a jock or a brooding bad boy, but rather a sweet, relatable figure who stands out by being refreshingly ordinary. Diane, on the other hand, is a mystery, more comfortable with the elderly residents at her father's nursing home than with her classmates. She's the object of desire, yet not in the typical trope-filled way. This isn't your average popular guy falls for the nerdy girl or good girl saves the bad boy narrative. Instead, Crowe and his talented cast subverted those expectations, crafting a romance that was both unconventional and unforgettable, capturing the awkwardness, sweetness, and complexity of young love in a way that still resonates today. So throw that Peter Gabriel cassette in the boombox, crank it up, and hold it over your head as Bethany Wells and I discuss Say Anything from 1989 on this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
John Hughes and all his teen dreams, montages and synthwave themes, and Ferris hands, the city bends, living life like it never ends. ATM bikes into the sky, Breakfast Club just getting by, radical dreams and daring quests. Back then we were all very best. To the 80s we will run, where every day is just pure fun. Goonies never say die, they remind. In those films we lose our minds.
Welcome in, 80s Flick lovers. I'm Tim Williams, your guide and host for all things retro on the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. Get ready to dive into a thrilling ride through the unforgettable films that defined a generation. We're absolutely thrilled to have you with us on this nostalgia trip. And if you're loving the show, don't hold back. Leave a glowing 5-star review on Apple Podcast. And no matter where you're tuning in, smash that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We want to hear from you, so jump into our conversations on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Your thoughts and memories are what make this community special. Are you feeling generous? We've got a way for you to support the show at buymeacoffee.com. And don't forget to swing by 80sflickflashback.com or our TeePublic store for some totally rad merch and original designs. All right, let's crank up the fun and get this party started. Today's guest co-host is someone who, much like Lloyd Dobler, marches to the beat of her own drum. Please welcome the awesome Bethany Wells.
Everyone thinks I'm a priss is the problem.
No one would ever think of you as a priss. Welcome in, Bethany. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Glad to have you back on the show. And we covered When Harry Met Sally, which was highly popular romantic comedy from the 80s.
One of my favorites.
Yes, absolutely. And neck and neck with that movie is this one, Say Anything. So glad to have you back on this one as well.
Yay!
All right, well, let's jump right in. When did you see Say Anything for the very first time?
So the first time I don't have a very long history with this movie. Laramie and I had already started dating, and it was just one of those movies that I knew existed, but it's not something I grew up watching. And so I had never seen it. And he was like, "You've never seen Say Anything?" And I was like, "Well, I know the thing with the boombox, but that's all I know about the movie." And so we watched it together not long after, maybe like a year into us dating, which was
okay.
So, but yeah, so it's been fairly recent the first time I saw it.
Okay. Yeah, this is not one that I saw in the theater. This is one that I'm sure I caught on video, a year or two. Maybe I might have seen it on cable. I really don't remember the first time I saw it. I just know once I saw it, I had to watch it over and over, and it just became like my movie.
So cute.
Yeah. And I related to Lloyd in a lot of ways, because this coming out in 89, I was already in high school. So, a couple of years older than me, but just that, kind of what you aspire to be, like to take that shot to call that girl that you've been watching all year that, everybody says is out of your league. Never did that, but I, aspired to be. But, one of my favorite lines it starts off the movie is when they're like, his friends are like, come on, Lloyd, you don't do that. We don't want to see you get hurt. I want to get hurt.
Yeah. Good for you, Lloyd.
Yeah. And the two, like, another thing that appealed to me was that he hung out with girls, like that his friends were female. And that's who all my friends were in high school. Like, I mean, I had some guy friends too, but most of the time I hung out with girls just because, and I don't, I guess I was, always in the friend zone, but I guess because I had sister and my mom was very, I hung out with my mom a little bit more than my dad probably. So my mom was more the conversationalist than my dad. Let's just put it that way. And so, so I was more, I guess I was more comfortable talking to girls in that friend, kind of zone. But yeah, so enough about my high school years. But when was the last time you saw it before rewatching it for the podcast?
It was probably, I don't know if I've watched it again since that first time I saw it. Like I remembered watching it and enjoying it. I just don't know if I've ever like gone, well, I'm going to watch that again. And then when you said like, hey, I need somebody to record this episode, I was like, I liked that movie. I'll watch it again.
Yeah. It had been a while. I think I've watched it in the last couple of years because I knew I was going to do it on the podcast eventually. And so sometimes when I know I'm going to do it, I try not to watch it because I wanted to be fresh before the episode. But I was just like, I was in the mood for that type of movie. I needed something that was going to be enjoyable and romantic and just, inspiring in some ways and just, just a feel good movie where I knew when the movie was over, I was going to feel good and feel inspired. So, so I watched it. It's probably, I don't know if it was last year, maybe within the last 2 years, but before then it was probably college when I watched it. And I remember because it was one I definitely had on VHS. And, as I spoke on previous episodes, when I was in college, I had much like Laramie, had the collection that everybody came to borrow from. But I remember, like, funny enough story, I remember talking to one of my friends at college who would always come in and borrow movies. And we got talking about movies and types of movies we liked. And I was like, man, I really love Say Anything. And we were talking about, man, yeah. I was like, man, Cameron Crowe, that guy was great. Like, whatever happened to him? When is he going to make something else? And literally like 2 days later, or like within a month, the trailer for Jerry Maguire came out. We're like, he's back. He's back. We've got another Cameron Crowe movie. So, so I'm a big fan of Jerry Maguire too. So, so that memory sticks with me. Like he might have borrowed it and that's where we were talking about it. But I remember us like, knowing who Cameron Crowe was, knowing that was his movie. Like I had seen it so much that like I knew that was him. So, and then when Jerry Maguire came out, I was like, the guy's back. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into story origin and pre-production. As I was telling Bethany before we started recording, I was surprised there wasn't a whole lot of information out there about how this movie got made. And I was like, as popular as this movie is, I would think there would be more out there, but I was able to kind of pull some things together watching interviews with Cameron Crowe on the Blu-ray special features. I think I got the 20th anniversary, which I know is now like almost 20 years old now, which is crazy to think about. Anyway.
Hey, slow down, because this movie came out the year after I was born. So
we won't talk about that.
Not quite that long.
Right. But you know, Cameron Crowe talked a little bit about how it got made. So this is kind of a hodgepodge. This is kind of a way of me piecing those puzzle pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
So as personal as a film clearly is, Say Anything was actually a gig for hire for Cameron Crowe. James L. Brooks had met the young writer while interviewing him about his time at Rolling Stone during the research process for the movie he was producing, Broadcast News, and had been impressed by the voice displayed in his script for 1984's Wildlife, his mostly forgotten follow-up to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which Cameron Crowe was the writer. Mm-hmm. He wrote the book that was based on and wrote the screenplay. Brooks hired Crowe to write a screenplay around the idea he had involving a girl who discovers her father's a criminal. So there you go. Father's a criminal, love story. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, this is the most feel-good movie about stealing from the elderly and tax fraud, you know.
Right. Yeah, we'll get there. The script evolved slowly over a 4-year period, with Crowe adding Lloyd Dobler, who would eventually become the main character. Lawrence Kasdan, writer of Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the director of The Big Chill and Body Heat had been circling the project, but told Crowe, according to an interview at the time, he said, "You are that main character, you should direct it." And so he did. Until Say Anything, Crowe hadn't written a love story. He told the San Diego Union Tribune that the movie's a love story for people who don't say I love you. And in 2009, told the Los Angeles Times that it's a very personal movie, and it reminds me of falling in love, falling out of love, and falling back in love with life and all the unexpected glories and pain that happen along the way. The personal part references his first love and heartbreak. He said, "She fell for me, I fell for her, but not at the same time." And yes, I used to drive by her house late at night, listening to music, feeling like a sap and somehow heroic at the same time. She was already with someone new, but I was going to wave the flag of our great love, even if I was the only one at the ceremony, which I thought was a great quote. Just a great quote.
That is such a teenager thing, too.
Yes.
And I love how in this movie you see it, not just Lloyd's not the only one that does it.
Right.
Because you've also got his friend.
Yes.
Who, like, she's like, I wrote 65 songs
about Joe,
about him, and I'm going to sing them all tonight.
Right.
I'm just like, you know what? Most 19, 18-year-old thing I've ever seen. And then Lloyd Dobler does the thing where he's basically like an 80s voice memo to his friend, where he's recording just random thoughts, which I do still to this day. Like, there are just certain friends where instead of like typing out what I'm going to say as a text, I'll just do a voice memo. And it's this long rambling thing. And then after I've sent it, I'm just like, I don't even know what that was. I don't even know what that was anymore. It's probably my favorite scene in the movie, honestly.
Yeah, it's funny because like watching it again this time, I was like, oh man, because I know I had a handheld recorder. I've had a few over the years, but I was like, did I do that because of did that become like watching the movie maybe want to get one and do that? I toured with a singing group for a couple of years between high school and college, and that way, because back then CDs were out, but you couldn't record on them at that point, not as easy. And so, we all had like the handheld recorders for like rehearsals and stuff. But then somebody had their great ideas, like we should document our tour on cassette. So like I have like cassettes of like life on the road, of like interviews with other people and like talking about what happened that day. So it's a cool like an audio diary of like a trip, which was a really cool idea. So one day I'll get it transferred over to digital before it disintegrates into dust like Infinity War. But this was Cameron Crowe's directorial debut, and if you watch any interviews with him, he talks about how inexperienced he was. He didn't really know how to talk to actor, or he talked to actors, but I think John Mahoney was talking about how he wasn't used to a director that let him kind of make his own choices. It was like, he's like, how do you want me to play this? He's like, well, just however you feel it. He's like, he wasn't used to being directed so free. But Cameron Crowe was like, it's on the page, however you express it, I'm sure we'll be fine. And but he also had a very good cinematographer, which we'll talk about him a little bit later too, that really helped him frame the shots. Like he had a really good team around him, which was good for it to be his first film. But yeah, it's still so good. I mean, it doesn't feel like a first film to me. Like it feels like he was well established at that point.
It feels like maybe not well established, but not the first. Like he maybe had a couple under his belt, but he was still doing that. Like, I'm going to play with format and I'm playing with the ending in particular reads of like a young director. Just like, we're going to make sure you understand this is a metaphor. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It does have some uneven parts too. Like there's some things that, especially in the beginning, like it's funny, like the scene when they're at their graduation and all of a sudden it goes to the scene of all the people with the video cameras in their, they're watching. And of course that was a great, hilarious moment, but it almost doesn't fit. Like this isn't a parody movie. You didn't need that for it to be funny, but it's like like you said, he's just trying different things. Like, let's just see what sticks or whatever. So Lloyd Dobler was actually based on a neighbor of Cameron Crowe's. His name was Lowell Merchant. He said he came to his door one day and introduced himself saying he was a kickboxer and that kickboxing was the sport of the future. Lowell had this stoic, noble thing. He said he was very polite and would wipe his hands off on his pants before he shook your hand. James Brooks told Crowe to write that guy. And from that moment on, Lloyd took life basically created from the mannerisms and spirit of Lowell. Crowe had John Cusack in mind when he wrote the part, but felt that Cusack probably wouldn't take it. In fact, Cusack hadn't originally planned to take the role because he wanted to stop making high school movies, but he saw a harbinger of soul underneath the standard outward appearance, as well as Crowe's passion for the project. Once they started riffing together, it was kind of inevitable. So in the behind the scenes, both of them really talk about a lot how Cusack really brought a lot to the character. He said when the script was there, it was there, but there wasn't a lot of depth to the character. And so like he gave Cameron a lot, like, should we try this? Let's try that. And so they really kind of helped to kind of form his character a lot more while they were filming. So which that seems to be John Cusack's style. He wants to be very involved with what's going on. So, but yeah, so that's pre-production and story origin. So kind of, I guess there's not a whole lot to say. That's why we can't find much out there, but it's still interesting that it started as like a script for him to just write and then became much more personal as they were going.
It feels personal. Like it feels like you're stepping into almost like a diary.
Yeah. And that's kind of how, I mean, that's his kind of writing style. Cause you go back to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That's why that movie stands out so much, because it felt like it was real teenagers and real conversations. It wasn't the Hollywood sheen over.
Right.
And it was one article I was reading, like doing research, and it was said, Say Anything is a teenage love story for adults. Like it's not written or it's not presented as like this, what would typically be called a teen movie at that time, even coming to the end of the 80s. People were used to John Hughes style of it being kind of silly, but still being heartfelt. And he was bringing like, this is, this girl's dad is, robbing old people, spoiler alert, but, is robbing old people, but there's this love story intertwined in it, which once to me made it feel more grounded. It made it feel more like a real story than just your typical rom-com, typical romantic movie that's all, fantasies and misunderstandings and all that kind of stuff that you get.
But I also love how awkwardly they talk to each other, which is so real. Like they don't know each other. They wouldn't have like a quirky, quick banter over the phone. It was more just like, you know what? Fine. I'll come. That's fine. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay. Yeah.
And there's no,
like,
go ahead.
Yeah. It happens a couple of times of just, they can't quite communicate well. It comes across as funny and it's enjoyable to watch, but it's also realistic of just two people aren't going to be able, life isn't scripted. And so you're not going to have cute, funny writers writing a meet cute over the phone.
Yeah. So say there wasn't this meet cute moment. Like he references, like we said each other from at a mall. We don't even see that scene. So really you don't know how they met. And it's kind of,
you don't even know if she remembers.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, he's like, oh, you remember? She's like, no, that's what was written on the note. It's like, oh, thanks. And like the dad, this is the guy with the Ferrari? No. The guy with Lamborghini? No. Actually drive a, Malibu.
The 80s Flick Flashback Podcast will return after these messages.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
Are you a fan of movies and TV shows inspired by comics? Ready for a podcast that dives deep into the thrilling world of adaptations? Well, look no further. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. This is your go-to podcast for all things comics on screen. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and every Monday we explore the dynamic universe where ink meets action. We break down the classics, reveal hidden gems, and uncover the creative process behind your favorite adaptations. Subscribe to Moving Panels now on your favorite podcast platform and join us on this epic journey through the pages of comics and onto the big screen. Remember, new episodes drop every Monday. Don't miss out. Moving Panels, where every panel has a story, every adaptation is a blockbuster. Subscribe today, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
It's melt season at Burger King.
Melt away the winter with BK's Cheesy Melts. Get classic, bacon, or shroom and Swiss for only $4.99.
BK, have it your way.
There were 2 opportunity patties. Limited time to participate in U.S. Burger King restaurants. Price may vary.
I know every operating system like the back of my hand.
I have 25 years of experience and have worked with several people from your company. I've been recognized for my passion. My team is everything.
LinkedIn delivers candidates who rise above the rest. With an up-to-date view into shared connections, skills, and interests you won't find anywhere else. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
So let's jump into casting. Do this quick overview. John Cusack and Ione Skye make one of the great screen couples in the film, but as ever, it could have been very different. Crowe wrote the part for Cusack, as I mentioned, but was concerned he wouldn't want to play a high school character again, so he started to look elsewhere. Those who auditioned for the part include Lauren Dean, who ended up playing the infamous Joe in the movie, as well as future directors Todd Field, who directed Little Children, and Peter Berg, who directed Battleship, not his best film, but that's what's listed there. While Christian Slater and Kirk Cameron also came close to landing the role. Robert Downey Jr. was actually offered the part, but turned it down, leading Crowe to finally approach Cusack, who ended up liking the part and signed on. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Shue apparently nailed her audition to play Diane, but Ione Skye narrowly beat out Shue and future Oscar winner Jennifer Connelly to land the role instead. Lastly, while Julia Roberts' hot off Mystic Pizza was up to play the role of DC, it was Amy Brooks who took the role. Now, I will say, we'll get into this. There is DC and there is, oh man, I'm going to forget her name.
The three friends.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
There's DC, there's Corey, and there's Rebecca. And I knew who Corey was. That's the one obsessed with Joe.
Right.
But I kept seeing that, and even when he's in the tape recorder, he's talking to DC. And even during that scene, I was like,
which one was DC?
Yeah, which one was DC? And so we'll get into, so DC has a very, very small role, or no, Rebecca has a very, very small role. So DC is like the one that's in most of the scenes together. Rebecca, I always thought was, excuse me, I always thought Rebecca was DC's younger sister, because they both have the dark hair and they somewhat look kind of alike, but one's definitely younger. But she's only in like one of the bedroom scenes where they're all talking to him. And then she's sitting next to Corey when she's singing her songs about Joe on the couch. So, so we'll get into who played those roles here in a minute. But I just thought, it's like DC, like who is DC? Which
one is that?
That was my biggest challenge with the research. I was like, I just watched this movie. I couldn't tell you who DC was. All right. So we got John Cusack as Lloyd Dobler. Of course, I've covered several of his movies already. We've done Better Off Dead. We've done Stand By Me. We've done One Crazy Summer. It's not on my list, but yeah. So, but he's also made movies such as Bullets Over Broadway, Con Air, Grosse Point Blank, Being John Malkovich, America's Sweethearts, and Runaway Jury. So, you know who John Cusack is.
I love John Cusack. I think that plays a big part into why I do enjoy this movie. Is I've always had a little crush on John Cusack a little bit. It's just that he's just got a cute little face.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I would say even by the time I'd seen this, I had probably seen all of his other teen movies he had done. Maybe not Better Off Dead. If I did, I've talked about this on that episode. That was when I really didn't find out about until later. But I had seen One Crazy Summer. I had seen The Sure Thing. He did another one called Hot Pursuit, which was not as well known, and for good reason. Yeah. That's another where he's, he's supposed to. It was it's somewhat. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. He was supposed to go with his girlfriend and her family on a vacation, and somehow he gets stuck and misses the boat because they were going off to some private island. So the whole movie is him trying to catch up with her and her family and just the zany things that happen. But so I was well aware of who John Cusack was before seeing this movie, and probably one of the reasons why I wanted to see it, because I did like him in everything that even his small cameo in Stand By Me is memorable to me. So so he's still by far, I think, the best leading man of teenage movies of the 80s. I mean, I put him at the top of that list.
I'll have to go in and watch some of his teen movies because I'm not super familiar with really any of them but this one. And so, no, I'm more just middle-aged John Cusack. I'm just
I mean, he was still good. Yeah. I mean, even in the 90s, he still was good. I would say if you want to go back and watch, he's in 16 Candles, but once again, a very small part.
I remember that. Yeah.
I would say for me, and I'm, flack, if I get any flack for it, if you want to test me, then, send us, email us, reach out to us on social media. This is probably my favorite. Next behind this one would be The Sure Thing. If you want another very well, Rob Reiner directed, very well made, great. Yeah. It's almost a kind of a When Harry Met Sally, but with teenagers. So it still has some of that kind of, it got some of that to it. So, so that's really good. And then it would be Better Off Dead is fun. It's more satirical, more goofy. Yeah. Same with One Crazy Summer. But yeah, those would be if you want to go back to the 80s, those would be my top. The Sure Thing would be your next one. I would think you would enjoy. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to that one on the podcast as well. That one's hard to find. I was able to get the Blu-ray. Your husband probably has a DVD copy of it.
I'll ask him if he has it somewhere.
All right. So throughout the DVD commentary, both Cameron Crowe and John Cusack kept returning to a phrase that summed up the philosophy of Lloyd Dobler and the movie as a whole. And that quote was, "Optimism is a revolutionary act." I thought that was a good quote.
That is such a good, that's such a good description of him. He is just unfailingly optimistic.
Yes.
Even after he's been broken up with, he's got this bit of hopelessness, but he's still actively searching. And it's just very cute. And then he tries to hold out when she comes back to him, and it's you know what? Who cares?
Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah, exactly.
We want to be together.
Yeah, another great line. Are you here because you need somebody, or because you need me? Forget it. I don't even care. Just and as a 19-year-old kid, that is 100% logical.
Absolutely. It is just very cute. And I love, so one of the things I really love is when he writes the letter, and the letter, because he's got these friends that I love that they're just his ride or die.
Yeah.
They think he walks on water. And I feel the same way about my friends. If they need to be pumped up, I think they're the best. Yeah. They're doing it. They're killing it. And that letter was fine. It was sweet, but no one has ever written me a letter like this. It just says I'm here for you if you need me. Yeah. And it just built him up so much to the point where I just overdid it with the letter. And I'm just yeah, I mean, you overthought the letter quite a bit.
Yeah. but that's who he is. I mean, that's
that's an 18-year-old nice guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that optimism. Another great scene is him and his sister when, he's been out. She comes in with his nephew, which cutest kid ever, like one of the cutest kids ever, and she's like, "Why can't you be his uncle instead of his playmate?" And then he has the conversation. He's like, "Look, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad told you you had to take me in, and I'm sorry that TIM left you, but I am not TIM." Of course, my name is I'm always like, "It wasn't me, man." But yeah, just once again, he's like, "Look, I know life is tough, but find some good in your life." He's like, "You used to be fun once." Yeah. And she's like, I was hilarious. He's like, "You were great." It's like he kind of helps to bring her out of her frustration and depression or whatever. And so, but yeah.
And like, how heartbreaking is it at the very beginning? Like, I think that's when he hooked me, is when he is taking a picture of himself in his cap and gown in front of his, like, there's nobody there to take his picture.
Yep.
And he's still like, this is the best day ever.
Right.
And he has no one there to celebrate with him.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
Mom and Dad called me from Germany. It was like they were there. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah. So good. All right, moving along. We'll get stuck here for 20 minutes.
Sorry, my bad.
No, you're good. This is why I have you on the podcast. Ione Skye as Diane Court. She made her film debut in the thriller River's Edge in 1986 before gaining mainstream exposure for her starring role in Say Anything. She continued to appear in films throughout the 90s with notable roles in Gas Food Lodging in 92. She also is the very beginning of Wayne's World in 92 and One Night Stand in 97. Never heard of that one. Other film credits include the comedy Fever Pitch in 2005 and an uncredited role in Zodiac in 2007. She also guest starred on several TV series, including The Twilight Zone in 2002, Private Practice, and a recurring role on Arrested Development.
Yay!
Yeah,
that's right.
You forgot about it, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. Look, I barely recognized for not realizing, but I rewatched The Wayne's World the other day just because I wanted something goofy on while I was working, and she's in the like one of the opening scenes with Rob Lowe, where like I guess she's playing his girlfriend, and I was like, she looks so familiar. Who is that? Because she's got like red, like long red curly hair. But I was like, that face, I know that face. It's like, oh my gosh, it's Ione Skye. So like, it took me a second to recognize her. So she's definitely. But she's only in that one scene, and that's it. But it was mentioned, and she talked about this. She had trouble identifying with the A student Diane Court because she wasn't like that at all. She said, "I wasn't a good student. I grew up with my mother, not my father. I kind of had a wild childhood. Even the father stealing money from old people. I kept saying to Cameron, I can't access why this would upset me. That didn't seem bad to me at the time." Her real life,
their heart.
Yeah, her real life father is famed Scottish musician Donovan. 2 years after the movie came out, she married Beastie Boy Adam Horovitz, but they divorced in 1999. So yeah, she was not like her character at all, which I thought was interesting because she played it so well. Yeah,
she does. I really enjoy her character a lot. I think she plays it so earnestly.
Yes,
and just that scene at the beginning where she's going through her speech and like running it by her dad, and like you could tell she's very self-conscious about it, and he's like building her up. He's like, no, that's hilarious. You're so funny, and it dies. Like, it just does not go over well. But like, she plays like she's very confident in her skills and abilities, but she does also have this self-consciousness about her social skills. And just, she does such a good job of playing that of like, we all knew that kid who was like much better at communicating with the teachers than the other students.
Yep.
And like, I'm thinking of her right now, and she was our valedictorian, and she was wonderful. She was a wonderful person. But yeah, it would be nice to see that person kind of get their moment of like getting to be a teenager, which is what this movie was about, was her getting to be a teenager. While her dad's kind of forcing her to become an adult.
Right. Yeah, that's well established there at the beginning where she's talking. He's like, you sacrificed all the parties, all the vacations, all the things that other teenagers were doing. You were in their books or whatever. And so it's like, that sounds good. Like even now, me as a dad, I'm like, yes. And then I'm on the same time, I'm like, no, I want my daughter to have a life. I want her to have friends and enjoy being with her friends. Yes, school is important, and I want her grades to be good, but I don't want her to miss out on these years of her life to make those kind of friendships that I had when I was in high school. So yeah, it was interesting. I'll say early on, it was interesting watching it again at my age and try to understand the father's perspective, which he's still not likable, or like, by the end of the movie, you really don't like him. But at the same time, like I
understand his intentions.
I understand his intentions, as good as they may have been. You crossed a line that you knew you shouldn't have crossed. Yeah. So it is interesting to kind of, because back then it was just like, he's a jerk. Why would he even do, you just, I call all adults were when you were that age, but, kind of seeing it as, once again, such a well-layered movie, such a well-layered script to kind of give you those, watching it from different perspectives and seeing it from different perspectives, for sure.
And I will say too, like I get the impression that he also wanted her to get to have a relationship and get to have that time.
Yeah.
But like he respected her choice to, focus on her studies. Because when Lloyd first shows up, he's supportive of her being with Lloyd. It's when he finds out that Lloyd wants to be a kickboxer for a living. And he's just kind of like, okay, well, my daughter wants to go to England and become a doctor. And you want to be a kickboxer and be her boyfriend. And those are your goals in life.
That's your goals in life. Yeah. Yeah. I think in that, especially like at the beginning, like you said, with that scene when you first meets Lloyd, and even when the whole thing about, no one ever call you a priss, like he's saying, like, I don't even know what that means, but I'm gonna use the word you just said. I think the dad, even though it's becomes evident towards the end, is that he's basically driven her life and made the decisions for her. He still kind of teeters on that. I want to be your father, but I also want to be your friend. But you kind of see like almost in a controlling way, where I want you to tell me everything so I know, which is the big kind of like not twist at the end, but like the whole thing where like she's like, I can tell you everything. I've never told you a lie. I've told you everything, and then you've kept this huge secret, this huge lie. You lied to me my whole life, and you kept this from me. Like that is the ultimate betrayal that he did to her, and that's why it lands so well in the movie, and her reaction is so genuine in that moment.
It does make sense, because she's clearly been manipulated by him for so long, and it makes you wonder, like, when she was a teen and she had to go before the courts and say she wanted to be with her dad, like, what did that look like? Because there's lots of times throughout the movie where she says, no, I'm not going to do that. And he just talks to her in a way where, and even if she's like adamantly opposed to what he's saying, he knows the screw to turn to make her do what he wants.
Right.
It's an interesting dynamic. And then just kind of seeing her whole world come crumbling down and realizing that this person that she has trusted her entire life has lied to her and isolated her from the person who actually has been honest with her since they met. Yeah. It's interesting dynamic. It's just that moment of when you go like, oh, my parents are flawed.
Yeah.
I feel like every kid has that moment of just like, oh, now granted, her moment was much bigger than most people's. But just that moment of like, oh, my parents don't know everything. My parents are flawed. They make mistakes and they lie even.
Yeah. As we find out once we became parents, like, oh, that's why you did that.
Oh, I get it.
I get it. Yeah. I have no ill will towards you now because I know why you. I must have drove you crazy. And they would say, yes, you did.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of the liar, let's talk about Jim Court, played by John Mahoney. After moving from England to the U.S., he began his career in Chicago as a member of the Steppenwolf Theater Company. He earned a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Play for his performance in the 1986 Broadway revival of The House of Blue Leaves, and went on to achieve wider recognition for his roles in films like Suspect and Moonstruck in 87. His other credits include 10 Men in 87, Frantic, 8 Men Out in 1988, Barton Fink in 91, Striking Distance in the Line of Fire in 93, Reality Bites in 94, The American President in 95, and the list goes on and on. Of course, he was also famous for being Frasier Crane's dad in the TV show Frasier spinoff of Cheers. So on April 30th, 2019, the film had a 30th anniversary screening at the Tribeca Film Festival with Cameron Crowe, James L. Brooks, and Aoni Skye in attendance. During the panel, Crowe revealed that before casting John Mahoney, Dick Van Dyke expressed interest in the role to the point where he met with Crowe and Brooks to discuss the screenplay. Mr. Crowe also stated that early on in the casting process for the part, the production sent the screenplay to Richard Dreyfuss, who after reading it sent back a note to Mr. Crowe that read as follows: "Great script. I want to play Lloyd."
Oh no.
But they talked about John Mahoney being kind of like the anchor of the cast. Like he was the one kind of well-known serious actor that was going to bring some not levity, but kind of bring some gravitas. Yeah. Bring some, this is a real movie. This isn't just another teen, quote unquote, teen comedy or teen romantic movie, like bringing him on as an actor. And, he's from Chicago. Him and Cusack were working on 8 Men Out at the time when they both got the script. And so they actually talked about it together about the possibility of doing the movie. And so he was a big reason why Cusack actually agreed, because he wanted to work with Mahoney again. So that was a big part of why the movie got as far along as it did. So, but he was great. I mean,
so good.
I mean, even watching it again,
that scene in the bathtub.
Yes.
The scene where he's in the bathtub and just like, obviously I've never screwed up to that extent, but like that moment of just when that you've done something wrong and it is all coming crashing down around you. Yeah. And there's no way out. And just that like frozen in fear. Like what just that you read he didn't say a word. He barely did anything. It was all in his eyes. It's not like he was running around making big boot. He wasn't crying or anything. Yeah. No, he was just and I knew exactly what he felt. That
was a scene that could have easily have gone in the wrong direction of going over the top for an emotion instead of just what would a father really do in that moment. And I don't understand why you want to get in the bathtub like that. I still like even watching. I was like, I see that like cry in the shower. They get in the bathtub. I don't understand why. I mean, maybe I've never gotten to that point where like that's the go-to place. I don't know if it's like you feel the safest there, or you're just because it's in the bathroom and you're kind of surrounded. I don't know, but anyway, not taking anything away from the scene. It was just like when it started, I was like, why is it always the bathtub? But yeah, it's all in his facial expression, like his eyes of like, it's almost like I could read his thoughts. Is like, I've been found out. What am I going to do?
What do I do? What's my next step? Yeah, Where do I go?
I've been so cautious up to this point to make sure this doesn't happen, and yet it's happened, and I don't have a backup plan. I don't have an escape route. Like there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, it's definitely like I felt like he was sitting there thinking like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? How can I get out of this? How can I fix this? And nothing is coming. Like he has exhausted every outlet at that point. And there's no way to save himself at this point. And he knows it, but he just doesn't want to accept it yet.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Like it's like a minute long. Nothing is said.
Not too short.
And it is
not too
amazing.
Long. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, moving right along. Lily Taylor as Corey Flood, who was obsessed with Joe. She encountered mainstream success with parts in films such as Born on the 4th of July, Rudy, Ransom, The Haunting, High Fidelity, Brooklyn's Finest, Public Enemies, The Conjuring, and the list goes on and on. Of course, I knew her from Mystic Pizza, which came out the same year. She was in it with Julia Roberts. That was my first movie with her in it, and then seeing this shortly thereafter. She's a great actress. She's great in this role for sure.
She's so funny.
Yeah. Cusack knew her from before the film because she used to go out with his friend D.V. Deventicus, I don't know, who would later write High Fidelity and Grosse Point Blank, which he was a part of. So Crowe told Entertainment Weekly that Lloyd's bestie, Corey, was named after a Corey from Philadelphia who had a relationship with a guy named Joe. He said she was always talking about this guy, and she sent me a tape that had a whole bunch of songs, and she said a lot of them are about Joe. 4 years after the movie wrapped, Lily Taylor met the real Corey, and she said she was still talking about Joe. Taylor mentioned how strangers on the street will run into her and ask her to sing Joe Lies. She said, I really don't want to do that, on the street, but it struck a chord with people, and I appreciate it. So, yeah. And if you don't know, Cameron Crowe is married to Nancy Wilson from Heart, the group Heart. And so they were dating. I think they were married at that point, but some of he said he took a lot of things from their dating relationship to input in the movie. But one of the things they did is because she, and a lot, like you'll notice in the opening credits, it says like additional music, Nancy Wilson. So like anytime someone's playing the guitar, there's like little guitar riffs in the background. That's her. Like she added those things in there. But he said they had they just were having fun one weekend, like pre-production, and they were like, we're going to write all 65 songs. They literally wrote 65 songs about Joe that no one will ever hear. And which one? I think it's Joe Lies. He said has like 64 verses. He's like, it's so long. But he said they had so much fun just creating these, these songs that I'm sure that they gave that to her for her to like develop that character. But I just, Joe lies when he cries.
It's so good. She's so, it's just,
earnest.
It's a very,
yes, she's earnest. So earnest in the part.
And it's so like, I was not to that extent, but like very serious about it. Yes. Like she definitely thinks she's that teenager that thinks she is acting very mature and much older.
Yes.
But like when she's 30, she's going to look back and be like, oh my gosh.
What was I doing?
Yeah. But like takes herself so seriously. And it's just so funny. But like in a sweet way, like not in a cruel, making fun of way, but in a like honest description that makes you look back and think back. And it's timeless because, like I said, this movie came out the year after I was born. I was not in high school until, 15, 16 years later. And I still like relate to a lot of the things that are said and done. In that time, just the vibe of it is very relatable. That character is so funny. And I also love how his female friends are just ride or die for Lloyd. Like they tell him like, I don't know if that's good. And then they're like, you know what? You're the best. We love you, Lloyd. You're doing the best. And and I'm sorry, but Diane was right. He's basic. He's really not special. He's a nice guy, but there's nothing spectacular about him.
Yeah.
But he's nice, and you can't discount that. I just love his friends are like, no, you're great. We love you, because I'd say that to my friends. Like my friends, I'm like, you're the best, and I love you, and I think you got this. That's incredible what you just did.
Which I love the scene where like I think it's after the letter, and they're talking, and they're like, man, would you ever date Lloyd? And she's like, yeah, and like like but because they're such good friends, like they had never seen him in that light, but they're supportive and they're all for him. They're like, well, dang, if I would have known he was going to treat me like he's treating her, like he would love somebody like that. Like, shoot, what am I doing? Falling after
Joe.
My favorite scene of hers, though, is the scene where her and Joe see each other and she's at the refrigerator in the garage or whatever.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, hi, Joe. How are you? I love you. It's like, yes, like all this.
So close. You were so close.
Yeah, all this defense of like, I'll never, don't talk to Joe. Don't talk to Joe. I'm not going to talk to Joe. I love you. I love you too. I want to get back together. Mimi's going away to college. I'm going to break up when she leaves. have sex with me. Yeah, it's like, Joe, you know, like, yeah, it's like, and you are the reason why she doesn't win. Like, I mean, you had her until you had that last line.
Justice for her. Like she really did the original who she's based off, Corey. Like, glad to see that she did overcome her love of Joe.
Yeah.
At least if it was only in the movie.
There's always that one that got away though, right?
Yeah. And I will say, if we're going to talk about his like female friendships, another thing, like legitimately the funniest thing in the whole movie is when he's doing the voice recorder. He's leaving the voice memo for his friends, and he makes the comment of like, I need more guy friends.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go hang out with the guys at the
yes.
And they say all of this like toxic masculinity stuff and all this crap. And his response is just to kind of push back. And he pushes back a little bit, and it all falls apart.
Yeah.
And he gets in the car. Well, that was a mistake.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes for sure. Like, you guys know so much about this. Why are you sitting at a sipping pup on a Friday night? By choice, man, by choice. Like, dude.
Like it all just immediately falls.
Right. And looking back, it came from Joe. Joe was the one that said by choice. And like, Joe, you even have a girlfriend
Joe,
who obviously doesn't even want to be with you right now. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right, let's move. We're moving along. All right, so we mentioned before, DC is played by Amy Brooks. Her supporting role in Say Anything was only the second acting gig for her, but it was also one of her last. She is the daughter of successful screenwriter-producer James L. Brooks, who's the producer of this movie. She later had a supporting role in I'll Do Anything, which was another movie written and directed by her father. This was her final role as an actor. She has since worked in multiple departments of film production, including serve as an assistant editor on a TV movie in 2001. In more recent years, she's moved into producing, and she co-produced the coming-of-age film The Edge of 17 with her father, and she also just produced the Junie Blume adaptation Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, that came out in 2023. So she's still
need to watch
still around. Yeah. She was like, that was one of those people, like, her face is instantly recognizable, but I was surprised she really didn't do anything really much after that. But she, I mean, decent role. And then Rebecca, as I mentioned earlier, was like the younger girl, dark hair. She's played by Pamela Adlaw. Now, that name may not seem like I wouldn't know that name, but she's been in a ton of stuff. Then she was known as Pamela Segal. Her acting debut was in Grease 2 in 1982. Her other notable films included Bed of Roses in 96, Lucky 13 in 2005, Conception in 2011, All Square in 2018. She was in Bumblebee in 2018. And she made her feature film directorial debut with the comedy Babes that came out last year in 2024. But if you see her now, you're like, she's been in like a ton of stuff. So looks very familiar. All right, then moving along, we got Lauren Dean, as we mentioned, as Joe. He appeared on stage in the feature films, including the title character in Billy Bathgate, as well as Apollo 13, Space Cowboys, and Ed Astra. I recognized his face. I knew he'd been in other stuff. Somebody else from Frasier, Bebe Neuwirth, as Mrs. Evans. This was her film debut, if you didn't know. On TV, her breakthrough role was Dr. Lilith on Frasier Crane's wife on the sitcom Cheers, and also on Frasier and the Frasier Revival. She's also been in Jumanji The Next Level, Green Card, Bugsy, Summer of Sam, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Of course, she's got a huge Broadway background as well. We won't get into that, but just a great little cameo there of her, with, like, before people really knew who she was.
Right.
And then almost unrecognizable Eric Stoltz as Valere, the guy who's hosting the party. I won't go into his filmography, but fun fact, in addition to being the character who threw the graduation party, he was also the celebrity PA on set. He literally fetched coffee for Cusack because he wanted to experience all facets of filmmaking. Well, I guess when you get fired from Back to the Future, you'll do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always forget that's him because it doesn't even look like him in the movie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to mention these. They're very quick. You know, most people that very small roles, but worth mentioning. Kim Walker as Sheila. She was one of the girls that Diane talks to at the party. She's known for a role as Heather Chandler in 1988 black comedy Heathers. So the only thing she was in. Jason Dobler, the nephew of Lloyd, was played by Glenn Walker Harris Jr. He did a few things as a kid actor, but didn't do anything else. But I just want to mention his name because he's Just so
the
good.
cutest kid ever.
And then, of course, Joan Cusack was uncredited for her small role as Lloyd's sister in Say Anything, but she's been in a couple other movies with him as well.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Baker Hall as the IRS boss who basically tells Diane that her father's guilty. Character actor has been in a ton of stuff. I won't go through his filmography, but I want to mention his name. Richard Portnow is one of the IRS agents, been in a ton of movies as well. One of those guys. Among the extras in the movie are Barbara Streisand's son, who played the drunk guy who had to be driven home. David Lee Roth's daughter, China Phillips, who played Joe's girlfriend. And of course, Jeremy Piven, who Cusack called Gerald, which I believe was Piven's nickname, but they've been friends. They were roommates. So he does show up in a couple of his movies, but he's hilarious in the movie. And John Cusack's kickboxing scenes in the ring, including the one where his nose is broken, are done with Don Wilson, who is a real-life kickboxing champion.
Nice.
So,
also, this is a complete side. You wouldn't know her just by looking at her.
Okay.
But Polly Platt was one of the women, and she's a very famous producer. So she produced this movie. She produced Terms of Endearment, tons of movies throughout the years. Iconic film producer.
Yeah. There's a lot of cameos of other musicians with Nancy Wilson being in the rock scene. And of course with Cameron Crowe writing for Rolling Stone for all those years. I had a lot of people, even some deleted scenes or scenes that didn't make the final cut. There were other cameos that we didn't see. So
yeah.
All right. Anybody else in the cast you want to mention? That was it?
No, that's really it. I was just like, hey, Polly Platt was there.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
All right. I always say this for this movie, but I think we already know. We've already referenced this already. Iconic scene. We all know what it is. Holding the boombox over his head is the most iconic scene.
It is.
When anybody says Say Anything, that's always the first thing.
That's the only thing you think of.
It's on every poster. Any kind of marketing for this movie since the movie came out has got that on it because it is the most iconic. But what's interesting to know, and some people may know this already, but I found it fascinating. Both actors in the famous boombox scene were filmed separately. John Cusack held the boombox in the middle of a park in North Hollywood across from a 7-Eleven. It was the very last scene shot on the last day of shooting. Ione Skye's bedroom was actually a set, so they weren't even close to each other. So
it was weird because it doesn't look anything like her front yard. So it doesn't I had read something like that and then watched it today and I was like, yeah, that's not her front yard.
Yeah,
at all.
I watched it again. When I watched it again before, I knew that they were done separately. I didn't know all the details about it until after, but the music isn't that loud. So I kind of got the way I interpreted this time was like, he's not directly across from her house. He might be like a block away, like at a park and just playing it really loud. And she's just kind of barely here. I know it's a stretch.
That's a stretch.
But so they did film it in the neighborhood across from her house several times. Cusack did not want to hold the boombox over his head. He was not for it at all. There's a lot of, if you watch the deleted scenes, and there's even some photos out there where he wanted to sit on the car and have the boombox on the car next to him. He holds it up long ways, holding one speaker with it up, and he tried all these different ways. And then they were also, they just couldn't find it just wasn't working. And so they were going back and watching the dailies, and the scene where they're coming out of the 7-Eleven and he kicks the glass after the first date, he kicks the glass out of the way. He said they were thinking about that scene, and they remembered there was a park across the street. So that was actually filmed at the park across from the 7-Eleven.
Oh, okay.
And they were wrapping up on the last day, and the cinematographer, and I didn't write his name down, but he's award winning. He was like, you know what? I was in that park the other night. It has a great sunset. If we get over there right now, we might be able to get a decent scene. And literally that was what they did. They got there just in time to set it up, and they caught it as the sun was going down. And if you watch the behind the scenes, Cameron Crowe's talking he's like, you can hear the director, we're losing the light, because they were having to film it as the sun was going down. But he finally convinced him to hold the boombox up over his head. But yeah, it was.
Lloyd's not cool enough to just sit it on the car. That would look like he was too cool.
Yeah.
The holding it above his head is so.
Yeah.
More Lloyd, I think.
And that goes into this. So there are a lot of stories about what the song was supposed to be during the boombox scene. As it was originally written, it was going to be Billy Idol's To Be a Lover. The actual song playing during filming was Fishbone's Turn the Other Way. A few songwriters were commissioned to come up with the song, including the Smithereens, but none of them worked. Eventually, Crowe found In Your Eyes on a wedding tape that he had made for his own wedding to Nancy Wilson.
Aww.
But he had to get permission from Gabriel to use the song, and Gabriel asked to see the movie. Crowe had the production company send him an unfinished cut. Gabriel initially declined permission to use the song, saying he liked the film, but not the lead character overdosing at the end. And Crowe was like, what? And he realized that Gabriel had actually seen a copy of Wired, a biopic about John Belushi, by accident.
Oh, no.
Once he saw the rough cut of Say Anthony. Yeah. One the guy was saying is like Peter Gabriel was getting bombarded by all these studios wanting to use his music for different movies. Yeah. And so when he called and talked to Cameron Crowe, he didn't know, he thought that was who the movie they were talking about, and it wasn't. So he said he hadn't even seen the Say Anything clip they had sent yet. So they made sure he watched it. He quickly called back and gave his approval. So, but one of the things that Cameron Crowe was talking about in that scene was he had to get Cusack get to the point where he wasn't giving him like the facial, like he just looked irritated. Like he looked frustrated. He's like, you're going to have to fall on your sword and like, say like, this is, I'm showing my love. Like I'm letting my defenses down. He said because he was frustrated about having to hold the boombox up, he was like, you got to get past it. And so, but what's funny is like one of the scenes when it was across the street and they filmed and he was holding the boombox like on the car, you could hear the original song that was being played. And it's like an upbeat, weird type of song. But Cusack was a huge fan of the band. That's why he wanted it in there. And Cameron basically said, it doesn't make sense. It sounds like a guy who really wants his ex-girlfriend to like the music he likes. That's how the scene is reading. It doesn't read like, I'm trying to win you back. And so, it finally worked. So yeah. So the iconic scene took some doing to become iconic, which I thought was kind of cool. So
I just love that it is what I think of even before I had seen the movie. It is what you think of when you think of John Cusack. Is him holding that boombox above his head. And so just to think that he didn't even want to film it that way. And that is so iconic just as for him as an actor.
Yeah. And I think it was like Cameron was like, you have to trust me. He's like, it's gonna work, trust me. You don't see it, he said, but I'm seeing it. You just gotta trust me. And he relented and said, I trust you in that, and it's become the most famous scene for sure. All right, well, let's jump into favorite scenes. The whole movie, or is there anything that stands out for you as like a top favorite scene?
I will say I've said it a couple of times. The scene of him doing the voice memo to his friend it's just really good, and it's so young person's just been dumped and just kind of like just word vomit, just speaking stream of consciousness, and he's heartbroken and he's mad at her, but at the same time, like the anger's not directed to her. It's more just like he thinks he's not good enough. And maybe he's mad at her dad, but he still cares about her.
What's interesting, like going back and watching, is like I don't think she knew it was her dad that was forcing her to kind of break up with him. I don't think he really understood that. Like he knew she was close to him, but especially because of the way the scene plays out, like he's telling her he loves her, which is like a big step, and then all of a sudden she breaks up. So I think for him, it's like this is my fault. Yeah, I pushed her away. I shouldn't have said it. Yeah, once again, it's just self-doubting. It's like so that's the way I kind of read the scene, which makes sense. Like, and it's hard because I think I'd forgotten that her dad gave her the pen. Yeah, so it was her dad's idea to give him the pen. Yeah, and so when she goes, her response was, "I would never do that to him." Yes, and then that's what she ends up doing, which I love the comeuppance at the end where when they leave to go to Europe, she gives the dad the same pen. Like, she want to give you a pen, so you can write her. Yeah, which is great. And
I would get in trouble if I didn't tell you my husband's favorite line of the movie, which is, "I gave her my heart. She gave me a pen." Yeah, by far one of the best lines for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think the best line is, "You've got to chill."
Yes.
I have hidden your keys. You must chill.
Yeah. You must chill. Yeah. That's, one of my most quoted for sure after this movie. We'll use that a lot. I love all the scenes with him and the nephew with the punching bag.
So sweet.
Yeah.
It's just so, it really shows like he's just a good guy. Like at the end of the day, that's what you glean from it is like he's just a good guy. Like most teen boys would not play with their nephew like that. They just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And it's just endearing. I honestly, I love the party. The party scene is so funny. There's like multiple like beats in it that just really, I love when Diane is talking to the girl who is just like, I know that this year was super competitive, but, and like talking about how, and Diane, you could tell like this girl was not on her radar.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But she picked up on the social cue enough to be like, oh yeah, no, you too for that for me.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's funny. And then, like I said, the Jeremy Piven just being so much. And then you said it was Barbara Streisand's son.
And Elliot Gould. Barbara Streisand and Elliot Gould. I didn't even know they were a couple, but yeah.
Him in the it's so funny to me. Him in the bathroom, because as an adult person who has drunk alcohol, and you hit that point where you've had too much, and you stand in the bathroom and you just go, oh,
right.
Just that moment cracks me up because it's a real moment that you don't often get to see represented.
Yeah, and I love when they go, I gotta go home. I gotta get home, and he doesn't know where he lives.
I don't know where I live.
We're about to play 3 hours of nonstop music, and then the sun comes up. Lord have mercy. What a great way to show how long they've been driving. It's like, anything look familiar yet? And Cameron Crowe talked about that character. He was like, that was just that guy that everybody knew in high school that like had that hair and wanted to be like as popular as everybody else, and thought that his hair was his identity, and like how he dressed, like that was it. And it was just like, what a way to just put that guy in the movie and just give him that little bit.
Give him a moment.
Yeah. But one of my all-time favorite scenes is the dinner and his speech. I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything as a career. I don't want to sell anything bought or processed, or buy anything sold or processed, or process anything bought or processed, or repair anything sold, bought, or processed. As a career, I don't want to do that.
It's fair. You know what? Right. That's fair. You got to go in there knowing what you do and do not want to do.
Right. And I can't tell you how many times not that because I couldn't memorize it, but like that would play in my head if I was ever like meeting an adult. So what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Well, I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything. It's just you wanted to be able to say that speech as well as he did. And so the funny thing about that scene is Cusack wanted Dobler to be like more like political, like he wanted to have this manifesto of like what he really believed in, and that's what that kind of came from, like that little bits and parts. So they were trying to work it into that scene at the dinner party. So a lot of what you see in the film is him trying to remember the lines, and the way they kind of edited it came across as like he's nervous. That's why he's frantically reading or saying it. And he said it just worked. Like we cut a lot of stuff of what he actually said and just put those pieces together where he just looked the most uncomfortable because it read as, I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. I'm just going to ramble about something that I think I may know or understand. And so I thought that was great how they kind of, that was kind of pieced together in editing, which I thought was pretty cool.
And it's so real. It's realistic of just like, he's 18. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. Yeah. But also, if my child who is about to go to another country to pursue something that she has been actively pursuing for most of her life, has sacrificed her whole high school career just so that she can get to this moment, and then she's at the finish line and she starts dating a guy who just says like, yeah, no, I just want to be your daughter's boyfriend.
Yeah, I'm good at it.
That's what I want to be. I'm really good at being your daughter's boy. I would be like, I'm sorry.
Get out of my house.
I'm going to need you to have your own thing.
Right.
Because, and it falls into, obviously the dad leaves the understandable reaction pretty quickly. But in that moment, I'm just like, no, because very often a young woman who has those kinds of dreams and aspirations has to sacrifice those for a male partner. And if the male partner has no aspirations, he's just going to follow her around. And at what point is she going to she's either going to have to dump him, or she's going to, have to choose between him and what she's worked so hard for. And I get it. Like I would look at that moment in horror. I'd be like, oh no, what do I do? How do I make this not happen anymore?
Right.
Yeah. But also don't steal from the elderly.
Yes.
And don't commit tax fraud. You'll have a lot more leg to stand on. I'm just saying, with your teen daughter, if you don't do those two things.
Yes.
The 80s Flick Flashback Podcast will return after these messages.
Hey there, fellow 80s movie aficionados. Are you ready to embark on a nostalgia-filled journey to the greatest era of cinema? Then look no further than the Retro Life for You 80s Movie Podcast. Join us every week as we rewind the VHS tapes, dust off those Betamax classics, and dive headfirst into the neon-soaked, totally tubular world of the 1980s movies. From the Brat Pack to action heroes, we've got it all covered. Breakfast Club, Ghostbusters, E.T. and Indiana Jones, and more. It's like a trip in Doc Brown's time machine, but without the DeLorean. So whether you're a die-hard 80s film buff or just curious about the cinematic gems of the past, Retro Life for You is your ticket to the ultimate movie time warp. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Retro Life for You, and we can be found anywhere you listen to your podcast, as well as on our website, www.retrolife4u.com.
This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
Welcome to the White Lotus in Thailand Cup.
It's a wellness centre.
You should get a facial. The lady in the airport thought you were my dad.
Oh my God.
The Emmy Award-winning HBO original series returns.
There has been more crime on the island.
Well, I'm a little freaked out. What happens in Thailand stays in Thailand. Oh, what does that mean?
It means we're not dead yet. Amen.
Amen.
A new season of the HBO original series The White Lotus premieres February 16th at 9 p.m. on Max.
Another one of my favorite exchanges between Lloyd and his nephew was the reference to the Hey Soul Classics TV commercial that aired frequently in the 80s. Hey Love was a compilation of 1970s R&B songs that was sold on TV. The line from the commercial, "No, my brother, you've got to buy your own," became a catchphrase at the time. And I do love that. "Hey, my brother, can I borrow a copy of your Hey Soul Classics?" "No, my brother, you have to go buy your own." Hook up the jab, hook. Yeah, like the fighting.
So cute.
So cute. And, this became a big thing in the behind the scenes. Ione Skye was quite turned on by Cusack during the car driving scene, saying that if she didn't have a boyfriend and he didn't have a girlfriend in real life at the time, that's so that they probably would have gone home together. Apparently, however, Ione's real life boyfriend waited around her trailer all day, which she said was really annoying. She says that in another life, she and John would have been a great love. And several points during the commentary for the DVD, Skye and Cusack confessed romantic attraction toward another during filming. So, and Crowe, Crowe talks about it a lot. He said there's those scenes like where they're in the car and the scene where they're in the diner. He said, I really felt like I was watching two people fall in love. He said it wasn't, you could say they were acting. He said, but I really felt like I was kind of peeking in on this relationship blooming. He said it was beautiful to watch them really kind of fall for each other in those moments. So,
yeah.
So we went to the scene after the breakup where Cusack is bummed out and talking to his friends up against the fence, including Piven, except for the guy playing Joe. Those were all Cusack's real life friends. And because the studio wouldn't do it, Crowe and Cusack paid to fly them out from Chicago for that scene. So once again, Chicago actors for a movie set in Seattle that was filmed entirely in LA.
Yes. I see no problems.
That's the magic of movie making, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't understand why it had to be set in Seattle. Like, Seattle's supposed to be so rainy, and it really isn't super rainy in this movie.
It only rains when it's appropriate. It rains when they break up because it's got to be sad. It rains when they kiss in the rain because that's a romantic. You got to have the kissing in the rain scene. Yeah. So, but other than that, it really doesn't rain. The roads are wet a few times, but that's just filmmaking magic. Yeah. Speaking of Seattle, this was sort of the beginning of a trend where Seattle was used as the backdrop for many films made in the late 80s and early 90s, which we believe was coincided with the burgeoning Seattle rock music scene during the time period. So I think that's probably why it was Seattle, because that was the music.
It was cool.
Like watching it now after doing so many 80s movies, like it really feels more like a 90s soundtrack than an 80s soundtrack because of the Seattle sound. Like that was so much more prominent in for us on the East Coast. That was much more prominent like the late 90s. I mean, you don't know that because you weren't old enough, but like for me, it was like 92, 93 where like Nirvana became big, and like that's when we got all those kind of those groups or whatever. I want to mention this deleted scene. I want to mention it and I don't want to mention it. You'll understand why. Have you watched any of the deleted scenes?
I have not.
Okay.
No.
So you'll appreciate this one. Knowing you were going to be on the podcast, I knew I had to bring this one up. So there are a few deleted scenes, and most of them you can understand why they're deleted. You know, they weren't like full on scenes; they were more like little like extensions or whatever. This was a full deleted scene from the film where Mr. Deegan, one of Diane Court's teacher, is at the party because we already saw the guidance counselor was there.
Yeah.
So they're in this room and they're talking, and he casually tells Diane, "I'd like to see you sometime. And I was always smiling at you." And she responded, "I just thought you were a nice, happy guy." He then attempts to kiss her.
Ew.
After she steps away, he says to her, "I wish you were older." It seems pretty obvious why this scene was cut. I will say it gives a good glimpse of who Diane is because she stands up for herself. Like she doesn't, take any crap from anybody. But he's so creepy. And it's played by Dan Costello, who was the one of, who's the voice of Homer Simpson. Which James L. Brooks was the producer of The Simpsons. And for, I didn't put this in the notes, but like when it came out in the theaters, there was a Simpsons short before the movie started.
Oh,
and
cool.
on the UK VHS releases, they put the same short on the VHS. But anyway, so it's a very cringeworthy scene. And I was like, I'm glad they cut it out. I was like, if this was in the movie, Bethany would spend 45 minutes talking about how it's horrible.
It's awful. I already think it's weird that the guidance counselor was there. Like, teachers don't need to be at a high school party. Like, if you're there, that's a problem. There's something wrong with you. Like, there's a bunch of teen drinking, and like, you don't need to be there. That's not that party's not for you. If you're there, it's for nefarious reasons. And so I'm glad it's not in the movie because that would make me.
Yeah,
that would make me honestly not like the movie.
Yeah, it would have definitely have tarnished it for sure. Like I said,
there's no point in it.
Yeah, like I said, it tries to, like I can see how it was trying to give another like side of Diane that you hadn't seen yet, but we see that later.
But we see it later.
Yeah, we didn't need it, so I'm glad I got cut. There was another pretty decent scene. I understand why it was cut too, and it's a scene of the dad while Diane's watching him and he's giving a presentation, and I'm not really sure where it's supposed to be in the movie, if it's like during the investigation or before, where he's answering questions about money that needs to be spent. I think he's going to a board to like ask for more money for some things. And I think it was there to kind of give more, like make us a little bit more sympathetic towards him of why, because he talks a little bit more about like how he's taking care of the people, and he's the only one that cares for them, and he tells stories about family members that abandon their aging parents there, which once again is very true. I mean, some things he says is very true. Does it justify what he does? Absolutely not. But he's pleading his case. And so I'm glad they cut it, because you don't want to sympathize with him. You don't want to make him, because it was an interesting scene. It was too long too. They had to cut it down, but
I think they also they portray it enough, like when Diane finally confronts him about it, and he just basically says, like, well, put me in a home, but make sure it's somebody like me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that scene. That's another great scene too. Yeah, that scene where she confronts him.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But that's another example of her standing. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. It's hard to like confront anybody that has been lying.
Mm-hmm.
To confront your dad.
Yeah. And she gave him every option to fess up. Like, just tell me the truth. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth.
Swear to God.
I swear to God, I found the money. And then it was like his face completely goes white. And he's like, oh man. Yeah.
And
but then he tries to defend himself. Like, I take care of these people better than their own family. I care about them more than their own families. But
yeah. And it's heartbreaking, because also, like, she's so honest, like so painfully honest with him the whole movie, to the point where it is cringy. Like, there are things she tells him. I'm a married woman with 2 kids. I would not tell my dad about it.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah. That scene is funny.
I wouldn't do that. And she did. And like, if that's the relationship you have with your parent, that's great. But it is heartbreaking to know for her that that's not a two-way street.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's jump into box office and critical reception so we can wrap this puppy up. All right, so Say Anything opened on April 14th, 1989 in the United States. It landed at number 3 at the box office that weekend, beating out several other new releases such as Tony Danza's comedy She's Out of Control, which landed at number 4, as well as Disney's live-action family flick Disorganized Crime at number 6. The Holdovers, Major League, and The Dream Team held onto the first and second slot for the second week in a row. So it was a profitable movie, but it was not a hit necessarily. But it still did really well. So we now come to a new segment where we take a look at how well the 80s flick holds up today. The all-new rewatchability nostalgia meter is our way of measuring how enjoyable a movie is for repeat viewings, along with the waves of nostalgia it brings. Here's how it works. It's a 1 to 10 scale. Any number between 1 and 10 will do, but here are a few parameters to help you decide. If you choose around number 1, it means I saw it once and that was enough. Right in the middle at 5 pretty much says a good rewatch every couple of years. And if you want to go as high as 10, it means it's highly rewatchable and full of nostalgia. So, Bethany Wells, where does Say Anything land on your rewatchability and nostalgia meter?
I do really enjoy this movie. It's fun. I will rewatch it. It's something I think once my kids are older, it's even, I feel like it still holds up, because a lot of like cringy 80s things that make you go like, oh, I don't know if I want to show this to my kids. It might mention them, but it subverts the stereotype a little bit, like the scene where he's talking to the guys and they say all that toxic stuff, whereas like in most 80s movies you hear that and they're like, yeah, and he pushes back and it all falls apart. And so for that reason, I think I'm gonna go with an 8.4. Okay. I respect it. Yeah, I really want to give this a 10 because it is one of my like favorite 80s movies, but because it's not one that I would watch, like I couldn't watch this like every week, or I couldn't, it's not one that I can watch all the time. But it is full of nostalgia. It's like I said, it and When Harry Met Sally kind of back and forth, my number 1 and number 2 favorite romantic movies of the 80s, of like, I think movies that kind of help shape my idea of what relationships were going to be like, that aren't, the rom-com, like perfect rom-com, or, the fantasy of rom-com of, the meet cute and the, misunderstanding and then get back together that we see on Hallmark every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Anyway, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's fun to watch. But so this one, I'm going to go a little higher. I'm probably going to give this one a 9, just because it's just because it's one of my favorites.
I haven't watched it that much, but it's probably, now that I own it, I probably will watch it more often. Like I said, when I'm in that mood for like, I just want a good feel good, a good movie, not just something just to have on, but something I can really enjoy and kind of, has some good lines and brings back some good nostalgia. So yeah, I'm going with 9. So which is good and high.
Very fair. Yeah. That's very fair. I do have a question for you really quick now that we're at the end. Do you think that Lloyd Dobler and Diane last? Do you think they stay together forever?
I don't want to think about that, Bethany. No, I'm just kidding. I had that same thought really kind of when you were talking about it again. In the movie, you kind of just like, I like how it ends where they're on the plane and he's kind of, and I still think about that when I fly now, like once the no smoking sign goes out, we're safe. I don't know. I have, what I hope happens is I hope that they get to England. She does really well in school. But I think if I was to write the story, I don't think he found what he like. It wasn't right for him. And I think they would have split up, but I think like later down the line, they might have got reacquainted. And when it was better time but when he had more of a plan and more established and she had accomplished some things in her life, I think they end up together. I just don't think it happens in England.
Yeah. I will say, I don't think they end up together. I think,
no, don't say that. I'm kidding.
Sorry. But I do think like he is a good boyfriend for the trauma she is going through in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think he is very supportive and kind, but at the same time, I think for his sake, he needs to figure out what it is he wants to do with his life. Because that gets kind of brushed over and pushed under the rug a lot in the movie. But at the end of the day, like, maybe you open a kickboxing studio. That's great if that's what you want to do. And it kind of seemed like maybe they were going to lean towards that. But like, it's not a lasting relationship for your life's goal to just be with that person.
Yeah.
Like you, especially somebody as driven as Diane is. And so I'm going to say they don't end up together, but I think he is a very supportive person during a very traumatic time in her life.
I agree with that. I mean, that's, I want to be the optimist. It's a revolutionary act, but I mean, that makes, I think it's one of those kind of, it's a good first love movie. Like the person they loved at first, but wasn't the right time, their paths didn't stay together after college or whatever. So, cause her life path and his don't really seem like they're going to go in the same direction. So, but they needed each other for that moment. Like she helped him, discover that he was, kind of, he could find love and he could love someone with his whole heart. And then he helped her kind of become, who she didn't think she could be, like enjoy, make some new friends and build relationships with people, but instead of just being stuck with school. So that was good.
And also like being like, imagine if, because would she have gone to England? Her dad was going to jail anyways. If she didn't have Lloyd with her, she wouldn't have gone.
No.
Because he was in prison. Like if her dad had gone to prison and that was the only person she had in her life, she wouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
But because she had Lloyd and she had a person with her, she felt she could go.
Yeah. He had all the tips. Lots of tips. No tips.
Lots of tips.
Yeah.
No tips.
Bavarian pretzels. So, I didn't mention earlier, but I will say like one of my favorite lines from the movie that isn't going to fit for my final line before we close out. I love the conversation he's having with DC and Corey. And DC's like, Lloyd, why do you have to be like this? He said, because I'm a guy. I have pride. And Corey says, you're not a guy. The world is full of guys. Be a man. Don't be a guy.
Yeah.
And I always liked that line. And I will say that's probably one of the things, like, I took that to heart. Like, even as a, 14, 15-year-old kid, I was like, that's something you hold on to. The world is full of guys. Don't be a guy. Be a man. And so, I wanted to make sure I mentioned that in the episode, because I thought that's such a great line. Good work, Cameron Crowe, writing some good lines there. So, all right. Well, I think we've exhausted this one as much as we can. I'm sure we could exhaust it even more, but we've covered a lot. So, but thank you so much, Bethany, for being a part. Always a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to have you guys listen. Always a pleasure to have Bethany on the podcast. Happy Valentine's Day. It is February. Be with the one you love and enjoy that time together. Even if you don't make it after you go to London, but it's okay.
I'm rooting for you, even if I don't think it's going to work.
Root for you. But send us your love story. Send us your how you met your significant other, and if it's as romantic as Lloyd and Diane, or tell us what your favorite romantic movie is from the 80s. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I'm Tim Williams, the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. That'll never be me. That'll never be me. That'll never be me. Don't you ever think it.
So good.
Pure fun. Goonies never say die, they remind. In those films we lose our mind. John Hughes and all his teen dreams, montages and synthwave themes. In Ferris hands, the city bends, living a life like it never ends.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.